Welcome to our third, I think, workshop of the Board and Budget Committee for purposes of going through our first round of the budget that the town manager and department heads have presented to us. Again, as a reminder to the folks that are watching, this is just a first go-around of the presentation of the individual department budgets intended for us to take ask questions, and we're not making decisions on anything at this point. Anything else you want to add?
Nope, thanks,
Let's go
Deborah.
straight into it.
So I do have some announcements before we begin. Just to remind the Budget Committee members that some of you have terms that are expiring, and nomination papers are available today. So there are three-year terms available on the Budget Committee. Those seats are held by Eric is one, Tom Murphy, and Stevie Cumble, who has resigned, so she obviously won't be rerunning. And there's also a one-year term available from the seat that Owen Casas had resigned from. So there are 4 total seats that are open. So run right in, Eric, and get your papers.
Yeah, I will.
Another reminder, too, that tomorrow is the presidential primary election and the state's referendum. Polls are open, as you know, regular hours, so. And Linda and her staff have been working hard, absentee ballots and all the like. At the last meeting, there were a couple of questions that we've looked into. Number one was about heating fuel costs, and after I looked more into this, so there's a couple of issues we have here. Number one, the averages, when we looked at them, the averages are fine for those 3 years that are referenced. The issues with the averages is that we don't have any data from the previous, from FY 15-16, because that was not tracked back then. So when Megan began as finance director, she started tracking them individually, which is very helpful. So they weren't tracked prior to that, which is an issue. We can get the data and dig through tons of bills to get the data for another year or two, which is what I had asked today, to see if we could get some more averages, because in the fiscal year 17-18, it was a particularly cold winter. So if I looked at all of the buildings, and all of the buildings had unusually high heat usage. So that throws off, we only have 3 years as an average, so that throws off the average pretty good. So we're gonna be doing more digging into that. So then when we meet with the select board and the budget committee during the workshops, we'll have more information on those heating cost numbers. And then there was a question about the pause contract with the animal shelter, so it had increased. The data that they gave us in the contract proposal was that in the last year, they took in 28 strays, or animals that were turned into them as being a stray, and 9 animals that were voluntarily given up by their owners, and that their their average cost per animal is about $250. Now, obviously, that is an average. It depends on what has to be done in order for them to make that animal available for adoption. So whether it's the shots or the spay or neutering and that type of thing. So it's average $250. We've asked for more information, so hopefully we'll hear back from them before the workshop starts, so we can have more information on that as well. And so tonight we've got all the ones that we didn't cover between the 2 meetings that were scheduled for last Thursday and today. And we're going to start off with general assistance on page 138. And so this department overall, the expenditures are down 3.4%, or just under $1,000. The wages are increased somewhat based on the 3%, and again, the averages are off because of rounding. The percentages are off because of rounding there. Line 3015, computer software and license support. It was $1,200 budget for the current year, and we're zeroing that out because we don't use that software for general assistance, so there's no reason to budget for that. So there's a $1,200 savings there. In line 5405, computer and office supplies, there's a double expense there from $250 to $500. And again, that's just for office supplies, mostly paper and the applications and the like that we have to have in the decisions. And then the revenue stays the same, so the net general assistance budget is down, again, about $1,000.
I do have a question on that, if I might.
Sure.
We've taken in several donations, putting
Yes.
towards this, that is a pretty substantial amount.
The donations don't go towards the general assistance operating budget, they go to the assigned fund.
To the heating or to the housing or individual lines, right?
Outside of this budget.
Do
Does
we
it-
ever utilize that?
We do on occasion. We try to utilize general assistance first, because the state reimburses us the 70% for whatever we use there. So we always try to funnel it through the general assistance program and the operating budget first, because we don't get the reimbursement if it comes, if we pay it from the assigned funds. There other questions?
Well, rental mortgage assistance on 3360,
Yes.
are we just way too conservative there? Doesn't seem like we're anywhere near 15,000 for the previous years, and something changed that would merit that?
I haven't seen much of a change in this year, so I mean, that is certainly a number that potentially could be reduced. I mean, you never know with that number, and that's what general assistance is anyway. You don't really know from one year to the next. All you can do is try to look at some trends. But if you're looking at that, you're looking at $8,300 is the highest number in the last 3 years, so, you could reduce it, keeping in mind that the revenue obviously will decrease as well. Not the full amount, but
Oh, I see, yeah.
70%. So we'd have to, any reduction you have in the categories of assistance, you'll have to reduce the revenue as well, because
it's
you won't be
muted.
receiving that.
Yeah.
And also keep in mind that this is one of the budgets that state statute says that we can overspend without voter approval, because it's something that's really out of the control of the town. If we have a really difficult year where there's many more instances of assistance that are granted by the ordinance, then we have to pay that out. Other questions? Okay. Next on my list is assessing, on page 122. This is one of the budgets that is affected by the change in personnel, where we combined the two administrative assistance positions, the 2 part-time into 1 full-time. So you'll see a reduction in the part-time assistant. It shouldn't say board assistant, it should say, no, I'm looking at the wrong line, administrative assistant, sorry. So it's 14 hours a week, just to remind you, 14 hours a week in assessing, 14 in planning code, and then 12 in the police department. There's also a reduction down under the employee benefits, under the health insurance line for the same reason. And obviously, some of the other benefit lines are reduced based on the differences in the wages, such as Medicare and FICA. Under purchase and contractual services, you'll see an increase in professional services, line 3060. One of the biggest increases there is $1,000, so we can update our tax tables, something that hasn't been done in a while, and certainly Carrie can provide feedback as well on that. And then it also covers the assistant assessor that we contract with Camden for, so her rate of pay has gone up, and that comes out of that line as well. those really are the highlights for the most part in the assessing budget. If there's questions about other individual lines, or if Carrie has anything to add, he certainly can.
I guess Carrie had indicated that on the travel line, it was, I think it was on the travel line that it was too tight, and so he needed to up that, the travel expenses.
Line 3105?
Yeah,
Yes.
Didn't get to do some of the
I didn't allow
things that you
spontaneity,
needed
because
to
I
do.
Good things that had come up that I couldn't participate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I certainly support that in
Yeah.
most of the training areas.
Yep. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on. Next up, I have the harbor on page 178.
Hey, Gary.
The first item you'll see under personnel services that has a more sizable increase is the deputy harbor master. So we've increased, the plan is to increase the hours of that position. I won't want to say increase the hours, it does increase the total hours, but it's, the position would be starting earlier in the spring. So it would start April 15th and go to November 1st, and it's 40 hours a week. And there's some staggered time there so that the weekends are covered as well as during the week by both the harbor master and the deputy harbor master. And that does have some effect, obviously, on the employee benefit lines that are affected by wages. And as with other departments, the workers' compensation line, because of our good experience so far, that's decreasing as well in this budget.
So is that because you're ramping up for the, no pun intended, but ramping up for the season, or?
Yeah, I've just noticed that I've ended up taking some from the park attendant line and using that, things that weren't expended, and
Uh-huh.
getting some in there a little earlier to help with the spring, because that's the busiest time to get everything. That's when, get everything in, yeah, and repaired, and so April is the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, what, it was May?
It was May 15th typically, yeah.
So we're basically adding
A
4
month or-
weeks.
yep.
Yeah, a month.
Yeah.
Yep,
of-
and I
of 40
wiggled
hours.
with some of the, other unexpended labor funds, but I thought we should represent it to what it was,
Yeah.
what I was actually doing.
Under purchase and contractual services, under boat repairs and maintenance, you'll see that there's an increase there. And that's basically for winterizing the Carolina skiff, and as well as the statue that's down there of Andre. But we also need replacement propeller, which is another $600 that will need to be done. And then under the building repairs and maintenance, which is the very next line, you see a decrease there. And that's basically because some of the work has been done over in this current year.
And will be in the spring, that rest of that will be expended on the
Yes.
painting. We put a deposit down, but they were
Busy.
backed up, yeah.
Right, yep. And under trash removal, line 3642, this is cut basically in half, because the dumpster on the commercial side where the fishermen's docks are, I negotiated a new lease agreement with Mainly Lobster, and now they're paying for the trash removal, so that cost comes out of the town's budget, so we don't have to eat that. So that was a good negotiation. Submerged land lease under other contractual services, line 4702. You'll notice in the previous 2 years, back in FY 18-19, it was $1,362, $967 the year before that. It continues to increase, and that's actually based on the actual that came in after December 31st. So you don't see it paid out of, in the December 31st lines, but it was like 1,600 and something. Yeah, yep.
Could you just remind me what that is? I got a question mark next to it.
Sure.
It's actually exactly what it sounds like. It's a submerged land lease, so we pay the state for what's under our floats. No, right, like everything that under our float. So it's a formula that we get every year, and it's, you know, based on what we have for commercial, basically overnight dockage. So when that goes up, you know, the percentage of what we pay the state goes up a little. And then, you know, everything that we lease out, so dockage, commercial activity is sort of taxed, I guess, if you will, at a lesser extent. But the more we make, the more they take.
Maybe we should move our float.
Yeah, right.
Put them on land,
Right.
so we don't have to pay the submerged land lease. Under supplies, you'll see the heating fuel. Again, we've talked about that a little bit earlier, so that number may change when we get into the workshops based on what we look at for usage, hopefully in prior years. Under safety gear, line 5515, you see an increase there of $1,500. And if you looked at the notes, we're looking for an LED spot search for the top of the patrol boat, as well as 2 no-wake buoys. And we'll be adding the HD cameras to the Harbor Master Building for added security, as there have been some issues down there in the parking lot with some people breaking into cars or stealing some items, so. Felt
Is
that
that
that,
being covered by a grant at all? Or a
There's a-
donation?
We had, our initial installation of cameras was covered by a donation. And there was some talk of that coming again. We haven't gotten any confirmation on that, but I'm always sort of looking,
Okay.
and I will approach that person
Okay.
again to see if we can do that. But these are considerably, I mean, the technology has come, they're considerably less expensive than when we initially put those in, so I think we can get something for not a huge investment, so,
Okay.
at least to start.
and then down under capital items, you'll see some changes there as well. And these are all based on the capital improvement plan that we have. Some of them have increased, such as the piling replacement has increased by $2,300. The float reserve is decreased, and again, this is, as we get better numbers and estimates and build up the reserves, then we can adjust the numbers. You'll notice down the last 2 lines, 7511 and 7512, those were budgeted for, not this year, but the previous year, and they really should be added back into the budget so we can stay on task with the hull reserve and the harbor building reserve as well. Other questions around the harbor budget?
I have two.
Joe?
One of a very specific nature, the other sort of a more general philosophical. So the first is, do we have any sort of a lease with Skyhook when they come over and they're stepping masts on the park side?
We do. Well, it's not a lease per se. It's a permit fee that
Okay.
they pay us. See if I can recall. I think it's $850.
But that's included in here somewhere?
It's included, yeah,
like
in
the
the revenue
launching.
line under.
Okay.
Yeah, it says commercial services fee, I think.
Yep.
Commercial marine. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
But that's included in. The harbor committee is looking at that, you know, year by year, because it's
Okay.
something that keeps coming to our attention, and we'll kind of keep an
And-
eye on.
The other general question is, again, I don't consider myself a climate alarmist, but I must say, over the past couple of months, with the astronomical high tides, and we get a southerly that comes in there, we have water that's washing up over the top of the seawall into the boat club and on the fisherman, the lobsterman's area. And do we have any longer-term plan for seawall repair and maintenance? Because obviously, it's only gonna get worse.
It is only gonna get worse. In the commercial improvement plan, we have some that is already sort of starting to go damage-wise. I would implore the comprehensive plan folks to really look at, climate change. And, I mean, because it's, in my tenure, in the last 3 or 4 years, it's really considerably changed, just.
Yeah, it's
in,
pretty impressive
It's
now. We got
impressive.
waves breaking
I mean,
over the-
yeah, and like geysers coming up through the parking lot on my side, that just come through. So there's definitely, it's something to think about. I mean, it won't be long before there's water in the Harbor Master building. I mean, it happens. It gets close now. And again, I'm not exactly a climate change alarmist either, but it just facts are the facts. So it's something to definitely,
Comprehensive plan.
I
or
would think just to
capital
look at a
plan.
capital plan as well, yeah. Nothing really specific, because there's nothing like when it comes up, actually, there's one in here, we put some money in the, I think it's like contractual supply to take the dock power, the shore power, and move it up, because that gets underwater, where it used to be maybe twice a year, and it was watertight. It's, almost every big tide, it's underwater. So that's just not, obviously, power and water don't like each other very much. So we're gonna, raise that up. It's not a huge investment, but it's something we're thinking about to try to mitigate that a little bit.
So I would ask the town manager, just in the back of your mind, as we do move ahead with capital improvement plans, that, something to keep in mind, because it's big money.
And there's also
It is.
grants out there too, so I'm keeping my eye out for anything, to do with that as well.
Right.
And like specific problems that are arising, other than the parking lot, which is an ongoing issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a question for Abby. I haven't been down in the park in a while, but last time I was there was quite a bit of washout over by the beach.
Yes.
Yeah, is that something that,
Souvenir?
how are
That's-
you addressing it? Because it was all the way down to that electrical conduit.
To the conduit, yep, and that is just like an ongoing, it's ongoing, each storm that happens. We try to, if it's midwinter, we let it sort of get, we put cones out to make sure nobody's stepping in it, and then, in the springtime, we have Public Works do the filter fabric and put that in. But in the planning grant, we do have some money to look at that seawall, because it just keeps eroding. It's
Yeah.
like, I mean, we backed up a dump truck to put some fill in a couple years ago, and it's like a hobbit, it's all, boom, all of a sudden it was like this. So it's just all eroded under there.
And the steps too. I know
And the
that
steps
area.
and so that's a loader and some more. But in the springtime, when we get some decent weather that's more dependable, we won't get these sort of storms that come in and just demolish the work that's been done.
Yeah.
We'll
Do you have money
Get that
in that,
saved.
in the budget for that?
Yeah, we have just the operating, costs of fill and things like that.
Jeff, did you have?
Yeah, I'm fairly confident I asked this question last year. I'll probably forget and ask again next year. But in general, on the revenue side, are we in market with what we're charging for users?
We look at it every year. We do the fees in September, October, and we get all the neighboring harbors, so Camden, Belfast, Rockland, and then some other, and we're right in the middle. We're less expensive than Camden, but more expensive than Rockland. And I think that the Harbor Committee is pretty comfortable with that being the sort of benchmark. And then always just trying to find ways to increase just the revenue end of things, overnight dockage and things like that. But as far as your answer to be in the market, yeah, I think we're right there, at least by those standards. Yeah.
And I hadn't gone over the revenue side of this yet at this point, but to speak to what Abby was saying, under the moorings, the overnight docking, and the tie-offs, you'll notice that there are increases built in or proposed for the revenue for those, because Abby does look at all those different fees. One of the other things that the board had agreed to this year, since I've been here, is to implement a fee to those people that cancel, a cancellation fee, basically, so that there wasn't one before. And it made sense for us to say, instead of somebody just not showing up and then not being able to reserve that space without knowing. So now they have a cancellation fee if they don't notify within a certain number of days, so that they get dinged for that, which I think is important. So if we can get notified and then hopefully rent out that space, to somebody else that's coming in. And you will notice under the Mainly Lobster lease, it's a little bit of an increase. It's a $1,700 increase, keeping in mind that we're avoiding that $2,200 or something for the garbage cost on the expense side. So there's a little bit of a good thing for us anyway.
Is this where you thought it would be, your first look at it? Like last year for me, I don't know, I'm like, wow, that's a crown jewel. I thought it would kind of pay for itself. I mean, we're close, or be a moneymaker, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, it's always tough because you have to balance the usage of it with the expenses, obviously, and you wouldn't want to price our harbor out of the picture, because then we certainly wouldn't be seeing the use that would be able to help offset those costs. And I think it's important to remember too, with something like this, that, it's not just for those people that are coming to visit or those people that are using the space for boats. It's also the taxpayers that come down and enjoy the park year-round. So in the communities that I've managed where we've had waterfront or some harbors, they generally don't break even. I mean, it depends obviously on the facility, but they generally don't break even because you do have that other use from people that are taxpayers that are just enjoying it, and non-taxpayers as well that come into the town and go down, and whether they have a picnic lunch there or just watching the boats come and go. So it'd be great if we could get to the point where we were breaking even, unless the other towns around us really increase their fees, then I don't see us getting there. But it's always something to watch, I think. Jeff?
So much the same way that we annually look at costs of services to people utilizing the harbor, maybe we can ask the Harbor Committee to also query the towns around us, whether their own harbors are self-sufficient financially, and if not, what percentage there is. Because we have this conversation every year about the harbor, about the Opera House, about some other things. And in the studies of what goes on, I think it would be an important informational point to find out what percentage the other towns and cities are carrying themselves.
I don't know if it would be the Harbor Committee that would be best to do that, or if it's a call by Rick.
Oh, shame on you.
You had made it so.
It happened when I had it, yeah, I had it.
There's a document with Rick here that we tried to
I
figure out.
know, my apologies.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's an operational thing that staff can certainly look into that.
Bill could make the call and
Yeah.
find out in a few minutes.
Yep.
Power you thrust.
Other questions on the harbor budget? Okay. Up next, we have the library on page 212. And as I'm sure you're obviously aware, the gray sections in the budget are those that are paid for from the library committee and the endowment, and the blue sections are those that are funded by the town. I think looking down through the employee benefits line under the health insurance, again, you'll see a decrease there of 42%, which is a pretty big number. And that's basically based on the current selections from the employees for their health insurance, which is not a bad thing for us. Under 3435, the building lease. Obviously, we're not going to be leasing that building for the full year, so that's reduced dramatically. Building repair and maintenance, we've cut that $1,000 because hopefully there won't be much building repair and maintenance that we have to worry about. We have to cover a little bit for the building that we're in. Elevator maintenance is new. We've put some money in for landscaping maintenance, for things like if there's a landscaping that's done at the new building, we obviously want to make sure that it's maintained and looking decent. And if it's just grass, we still need to mow it and keep things looking decent as well.
But the town is mowing it though, right?
Potentially, yes. It's kind of we're up in the air as to what's going to be there. As you know, whether it's going to be a lot of grass, whether there's going to be a lot of plantings or whatnot.
Yeah.
So we're kind of hedging our bets a little bit in some of these categories in the library budget. Under training and education, from the town paid's perspective, line 3920, you see an increase of there of not quite $1,000. The library director, Ben, has a chance to attend the American Library Association's Leadership Institute. And so we won't know until May whether he's been accepted into that program. But I've highly recommended that he attend that. I think it'll be a great opportunity for him, especially as we get into a new building, and have some, obviously, new programming and new features in that building to take advantage of. So it's a little bit more money than what we normally see, but I think it's well worth it. Heating fuel, again, this is one of those cases where we're going on what our engineers are telling us, based on the square footage and the type of heating system that we have in the new building. Ben feels that that's incredibly low, based on the square footage that we're heating, but again, it's highly efficient. The building will be obviously brand new, so we'll have to see where that falls. That's pretty much it on the expenditure side for the library. Do we want to have some questions about the expenditures before we look at anything else?
I originally just had a question on the post office thing, because I knew we were taking away post office boxes, but I had forgotten that the library endowment is paying for that.
Yeah.
Right.
And secondly, you guys are right across from the post office, so it would make sense in their case to have the post office box. I was just looking for consistency across the board, but then I figured it out, right?
Yep. Helen, did you?
Yeah, I had two issues I wanted to bring up in terms of the library. As most of you know, I'm on the library committee, and I also sit on the library foundation. We've raised the money to build the building, and now we need to furnish it. And it's my understanding that some of the money that was originally in the original vote for furnishing is not there anymore. If you'll look at under capital items 7335, it says furnitures and fixtures, and there's $2,500 in the budget. That's to be paid by the library committee. I don't think anybody ever expected the library committee to pay for all the furnitures and fixtures in the new library. And so I would like to add either a line item on the town's part of the budget, or add it to 7205, building improvements, of $10,000 to help pay for the new stacks.
And that certainly is something that can be discussed during the workshop as well.
And the other thing, back over on purchased and contractual services, the landscaping maintenance. Again, the landscaping for the building, land around it is not in the original bond or coming under the foundation's money, and I would like to see about 10,000 added in there to help pay for the new plantings.
And that's certainly, again, something that can be discussed during the workshop, but it's good to make those points. And just so that everybody is,
So furnishing was never part of the original bond? If
It
I was a
was.
taxpayer voting for that? It was, and we can't just take it out, is that accurate, or?
So,
yeah, I'll let somebody that's been here longer than I have when it comes to the library.
so I will try to explain it the best I can. It was very complicated and weird, and I think the way that it happened was when, and anybody who was there part of the process, correct me when I go astray. When FI took the building contract for the amount that they said we would be able to build it for, when all the bids came in high, and the town chose them to build it, they incorporated the costs of the parking into the building. So for those 7 parking spots that we're gonna have on Lime Rock Street, those then became part of the building budget that FI was covering. And where those came out of the building budget was for the furnitures and fixtures inside. So when that happened, it gutted the budget for the shelving and the furniture for the inside.
I would say it a little bit differently.
Oh, okay.
So let me give it a try and see if this is how Jeff remembers it. When we were having the parking controversy, before FI was chosen, you know,
Okay.
they were our owner's rep at this point in time. And the parking controversy, they came forward, Bettina came forward and said, I'll pay for the parking, I'll do the parking, I'll pay for the parking, you know, just to make that controversy go away, she had hoped. And so we held her to the fact that she had paid, you know, she offered to pay for the parking. Then what happened was, all of a sudden, the bids come in too high, and now FI is paying for the building of the entire thing. We did not let her off the hook with respect to the parking, because we said you already agreed to the parking. Now, you know, you're gonna have this fixed contract for the building as well. And then her response to that was, okay, I'll make good on that, but anything that's left over in soft costs, et cetera, you know, that's left that the town has at the end of the day, that goes to help pay for the parking, and then we'll make up the difference. But that's at a higher priority of distribution, so to speak, than furniture and equipment.
Yeah, there was no discussion that parking would be paid for in lieu of
Okay.
furniture,
Yeah.
equipment ever coming out.
Right.
That was never a trade.
Okay.
As far as the endowment's concerned and that board, I mean, have they discussed this? I mean, we're talking
Yes.
about $10,000.
We've discussed.
How much is in the endowment now?
So for the library committee's endowment, it's I think around 800,000 right now.
Before last week? I'm sorry.
Well,
I had to live through
Yeah,
it, so I
yeah,
had to
yeah,
choke
yeah,
out there.
And that
No.
was down to 400,000.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
plus the foundation, has taken up the task of trying to raise an additional $250,000, as I understand it, for exactly that
Yes.
purpose, for fixtures and furnishings and so forth,
Yeah.
furniture.
So they are pursuing that?
Yes, the
Yeah.
foundation is pursuing it, and so that's where we see, well, I mean, I think that's where many of us on the select board see the furniture and equipment and fixtures coming from.
the, should I tell them?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a public meeting. The library committee, who has already donated over almost $200,000 for the library, is in effect fronting the foundation to the tune of $100,000 so they can make the order for the furniture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The foundation will be paying us back,
Yeah, I understand that.
and they're looking for donations for that. But
It's a cash flow issue, right?
it's a
Because-
cash flow issue.
Yep.
And I really feel strongly that the town needs to cough up a little bit more money, especially for the stacks. They've come in a lot lower than originally priced at, to somewhere between 17 and 47,000. I
Well,
think
we
so.
were originally estimating that the cost of the stacks was gonna come in around 150,000, and right now it's hovering with freight and installation at around 72,000.
Right.
So we got a very deep, good discount on those, which we're excited about.
Remember that the select board is pretty committed to the 1.5 million from the town and 2 million from, you know, so, I mean, we'll get into it, but it's,
Right,
You know,
yeah.
what the commitment that we made was. Now, you know, look, I'm not naive, I realize this is all some funny money to a certain extent, but that was the agreement. So the concept is for the furniture and the shelvings, theoretically, that should all be raised privately because we told the people that we would not exceed this number with their tax dollars.
Yep. And this board has been very, adamant about sticking to that commitment.
Yeah. On the other hand, the library committee has come up with an incredible amount of money.
Yeah, but I
Out of
have
the
faith
endowment.
in the foundation.
Well, I've got faith in the committee and the
We-
foundation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the issues with the foundation in terms of their fundraising is, unfortunately, a number of the businesses are not stepping up to assist the community. And so they're going back to their big donors, some of their medium donors, more and more. And there's a threshold. I mean, a lot of us got hit this past week. It's gonna take a while to recover. It's gonna take a while for the endowment to recover. So I don't think asking the town to come up with, in essence, another $10,000 to $20,000 is all that big a deal.
Those are things that we'll cover when we get
Yep.
into the weeds.
Yep, absolutely.
It's called horse trading.
Any other questions about the library budget?
On the revenue side, can you break down for me roughly, because it says endowment, grant, donor, I'd like to know what, is the endowment able to keep up since they made a commitment to building the structure?
Yeah, when I build the budget, I try to go as net zero as I can with the endowment's money. This year, there are some things that really pushed that up. I mean, in years past, the endowment has hovered around 19%. Right now, it's covering 29%. A lot of those are in big ticket items. We added $30,000 for a moving company to move the books into the new building. Last time we did it on our own, but it half killed the whole staff. And moving into a new building, we want the staff sharp. So that's a one-time pop this year. The same, we added in security features for the downstairs. That's a one-time hit for us too. Seacoast is gonna put those in, and then, we won't have those next time. Yeah, the endowment should be able to continue covering what it does for us.
What is,
Yeah.
like this year, what's that projected to be? But like, I'm looking at line R0951, I guess, on revenue, like, just out of curiosity. Is it like 80,000 a year or 40,000?
Bill would be the one to
Because it's
answer.
800,000, I would think it'd be like 30 to 40,000 tops.
For the amount of revenue that comes in, or?
What you get for reimbursement from the endowment, on
We're
the revenue side.
We use a set amount each month, which is 5% of the,
Yeah, so each month we get, I think it's 2,000, it's just shy of $2,500 a month.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then that goes in with our desk funds, so things, donations, and the money we take in at the desk of the library. But that money that comes in at the library goes into the endowment.
And so if it's like, so if the revenue's 129,000, budget coming up, we got 30,000 from the endowment. That's a pretty big, you think there's gonna be that many more donations on the revenue side? I'm
No,
just
so
asking.
the way the revenue here works is weird, and it doesn't look right. So the revenue here is, the town pays the bills for the library, and then the library committee reimburses the town for all the bills from the library.
This line that you're seeing is the offsetting revenue to the expenses that are in gray,
Yeah, so it's,
because it's supposed to have a net zero impact to the taxpayer.
Yeah.
so everything that's on the,
I never got that last
Yeah.
year. So I got it, and I told a couple of my financial friends and I was like, dude, I'm a CFP, I don't know everything.
Yeah.
And they're like, we don't get it either, man. So so I was just trying to understand.
Yeah.
So like, it would make
Offset.
sense if you said, yeah, the endowment's 30 grand, we get 50,000 from these two other people, and then we get, library fees of like 5 grand, and we do this, and it's like 129, then we can take it off. But when you pay a bill and then the town reimburses you, that doesn't mean to me, that's not net to me, from a financial standpoint, that's an expenditure.
So,
Am I missing, I don't know if anyone else feels that way, or if I'm,
I'd have, talk to my husband, he's the treasurer, he knows
we
that.
have to go through a
Coming
warrant, we have to go through a warrant process to issue checks for, town functions like the library. In this case, So we have to issue those checks from the town account
Yeah,
like we
that's
do
fine.
anything else.
Yeah.
So these expenses are not supposed to be taxpayer expenses. It's supposed to be funded through the endowment. So the only way that we can appropriately go through that warrant process is to budget the expenditures, which we have, are the items in gray, and then we offset them with the revenue from the endowment because we have to go through that warrant process.
But if I, like, just, like, if you were running a business here, just for a second, so if the expenditures are 445, and then the endowment's giving me 30,000, so then I'm down to 415-ish, and then donations, I would think, would bring it down. I hear what you're saying on the warrant, I'm just saying from a pure,
You're not
here's the money
seeing-
coming in, here's the money going out, it just seems like the net is actually higher in general.
Well, it is, because you have those items that the town has to pay for.
Right, so the items that are in gray are the ones that the library committee and the endowment pays for directly. So the number you see in the revenue side is the sum of all those gray shaded expense
Right.
numbers.
Right.
So
But-
you don't see the breakdown in, what you're saying is in the revenue side, you just see one number, you're not seeing, how much revenue's coming in at the desk, you're not seeing how much is,
Well, that, and I don't think we're assigning a true cost to this department necessarily. Like,
Because-
just because,
because we're taking the revenue out,
Yeah.
is that what you're saying?
yeah. To me, this, like, because all these are added up, right, even the gray on the side, so
Right.
it's 445.
Right, that's the true cost of the department, and then we have
Right.
revenue coming in that offsets that cost.
This part here, most of that is the pay and benefits, which is $296,070.
But
For this,
the 129 number's the number
Yeah.
that I'm having.
And then there's, out of all this other stuff, that's only $20,579 comes out
Am
from
I
the town.
off on my island, or does anyone else
No,
understand what I'm saying?
It's confusing, and for me, I think what would make it a whole lot easier to conceptualize is if I at least understood what the 129, 158 was comprised of, if there was a separate chart, even if it wasn't part of the budget proper, if I could see X amount is from endowment, X, Y is from donations.
Well-
That, if I could understand that, that would help.
It's
Yeah,
just,
so-
it's just, financial, just transparency on, I understand the way it's been done.
No, and I don't disagree with that, I mean,
Yeah.
I've got a note for next year to be able to provide that breakdown, so that you can
But,
see.
but if another department, like if you had a $100,000 expense and they pay for it and then the town reimburses them and it nets out, like, that doesn't,
Yeah.
that doesn't equal out for me.
Well, and some of it may be just semantics too, because the endowment really comprises the grants and the donations. So when we get
Right.
donations and grants, well, the grants can go to the town or to the library, but those donations go into the endowment to help cover
Right.
those costs each time. I don't know if that helps clarify
Well, it's
things, but they're not
30,000
like separate.
It's 30,000 from the endowment. I'd love to hear some other numbers of, like, where the 129's, you know, if you said, we think we're gonna get 10,000 in grants and, you know, should be able to break all that out, I would think.
You have
Well,
the budget for it, basically, the budget of your income,
yeah,
is basically what he's asking.
right.
Yeah, so information about the endowment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I thought this year they were going to do two separate sections, in a sense, two separate budget pages. One with all the library stuff on it, and one with all the town stuff on it, so that it could be more clear. So I was a bit surprised to see them all mixed up again.
You'd still have the issue, though, because you wouldn't see what the breakdown is of the money that's coming from
Right.
the library committee. You know, what share of that is revenues that the library collects, you know, in the operation, and what share of it, I know
Is
it all
from the
comes from the
endowment.
endowment, but what share of it is expected to be donations, or what share of it is expected to be operating revenue that comes in, and then what share of it is actually coming from the interest, the revenue from
Right.
yeah, so I understand what you're saying, absolutely.
And that's one of the two issues for me, I think, because I'm not sure I'm conceptualizing how it all works. What I thought I heard was, when you get invoices, for example, the library committee pays them,
No.
No, the town pays the
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 invoice.
town pays them,
first,
and then they reimburse you.
And then
Okay,
the committee reimburses
I get that
us.
now.
Yeah.
I had it, yeah,
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. Ben will prepare a warrant each month for us to sign, and that check goes to Megan, to pay whatever's on the wall.
So it's
I
just a
think
re-
it's a lot simpler than it looks like here.
Yeah.
and
Yes.
Maybe because it's oversimplified here.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if
No,
we
and
can get a
I
little bit more
certainly,
information, we'll get
I
it.
understand what you're looking for on the revenue side, and I think we can do that easy enough.
I have another 30,000-foot question, and it actually goes back to page 211, the very first line, the department overview. And I think probably, Helen, you're going to have the most historical perspective of the people here at the table, but I just want to be clear, who ultimately has the responsibility for the maintenance of our new building? If you look at this line, it says the town provides for personnel, wastewater, weekly cleaning, and then it talks about the library's endowment fund, gifts and grants. And the reason I asked this is just, again, historical perspective. I've heard that the responsibility has at times bounced somewhat back and forth between the select board and the library committee with the endowment. And I think in some ways, our library fell through the cracks in a couple of years, depending on whose perception it was that was in charge of the actual physical building. And, you know, we're now at a point where we have a brand-new shiny building, and just the same way the public safety building, the town office, the West Rockport Fire Station, I suspect that the town should ultimately have responsibility for capital improvement, repairing the roof in 20 years. And I just want to make sure everybody's on the same wavelength, because there's been issues in the past.
I'm not aware of any issues. All I've known is that the library is a town building and the town is responsible for the building.
Well, maybe our department
You-
overview should actually include that. Not just the personnel services, but say in there, the building.
The thing you may have heard is the control of the endowment.
No,
And that-
no,
no,
this had
okay.
to do with windows
No.
being replaced.
No,
and-
build, yeah.
Yeah, okay, no, it wasn't
Basically, the
that.
library committee is, except for the staff, is responsible for what's inside the building.
Okay. Well, I just
Anything
want, I
outside.
bring it up so that at least for right now, who knows what it'll be in 4 years from now with the new budget committee, select board, et cetera. But for right now, the town is responsible for maintenance of the new library building.
Any other questions in the library?
Can we get a break? Can we get a break out of the, hate to keep going back to it for the fourth time. I think it's easy to come up with that.
On the revenue side?
Just probably haven't gotten the question before. I'd like a break out of the revenue side and not the town reimbursing answer.
Yeah, no, I'll look into it. If I can get it to
Bill
you
would
for the
have that.
workshop, then, yeah, then we
And it'd be
can.
great if it's trending that way, because that's a big increase,
Well, I think
50% increase.
30,000 of that, I think,
Yeah,
was something for the movers that
Yeah.
won't be there.
Yeah.
So
Right.
now we'll be back at
20,000.
near 100,000 instead of 129.
Yeah. a lot of the increases on the library endowment side that I put in they were things that we didn't discuss here, because we seem to focus just on what the town is paying for. But a lot of those increases, the huge amount is for the moving company to move the library, and then more of that, and then another 9,000 of that, or 6,000 of that, is for Seacoast to install the new security stuff for the downstairs. So those won't be there again. So
So that revenue
39 of
number-
that won't be there next year.
Right.
So the way, I guess, the trends that go up and down are based on the bills that I'm paying for the operating costs. And this year's operating costs will be higher because, I don't know what's gonna happen in the new building, so I did add some operating costs to try to cover those unknowns. And this was all done with the library committee's, okay. And then some of those big ones will will go away, and we'll readjust after we're in the new building and we get data to see what can go up and what can go
So
down.
on the revenue side, I understand that the expenses will go up and down.
Yeah.
How does the revenue, what's the mechanism for causing revenue to go up and down?
Our understanding of
Are you
So-
taking out
so
a
the-
corpus of an endowment, or are you expecting donations?
So the
That's part
revenue
of
to
what
the
we're trying
town
to
is
get
the payment from the endowment. That is what is the revenue to the town that you're seeing.
at. Right, so,
So those are the expenses.
no, I understand that, it's just that endowments don't necessarily go up by $30,000 matched exactly when you need them, so like,
No.
that's what, like,
So there, so
Are you
there's
pulling
more,
out of the
there's more,
corpus?
more funds that are coming out of the endowment
do you take them
for,
more? Yeah.
for this next
Yeah.
year.
So-
And
because of those.
presumably within policy.
Yes.
And I have, now that I haven't asked a question yet, when you look at page 214 and you look at your revenues, you know, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19 are all pretty consistent. What was the $30,000 jump for the 19, 20?
That's the moving expenses.
Moving
Or
from,
no, of 1920, I'm
Last year.
sorry.
yeah, no, I mean, that's a significant jump from the year before.
I don't know. you
Didn't
were
they
sitting
redo
here,
the air
Mark.
conditioning?
Well, no, I mean, I don't
I
think,
know.
I mean, I understand, I think the 30,000 to make it to 129, but there's still a $30,000 jump from the previous 3 years to the year that we're in,
Right.
and I'm curious as to what that amount.
Whatever it is, it hasn't been spent yet.
Well, and that's where I'm going, because maybe we don't, we can use that 30,000
Buy some stuff.
to pay for the moving.
At least as
Well,
of
those would be
December
out of
1st.
the library endowment.
I think we ought to let,
Yeah.
Bill, Ben, pull together the
Yep.
revenue breakdown
I guess my,
for the last 2 years, or last year, this current fiscal year and next year's budget.
no, and that's fine. The $30,000 increase, I would be interested to know what caused that.
Right, that would be the breakdown.
Thank you.
Where did the money come from this year? Where is it gonna come from next year?
It was 30,000, now we're up another 45.
Right.
Okay. Anything else under the library?
Must be getting excited.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it is fun.
I'll be glad when I don't have the monthly, weekly construction meetings. I like to see Doug and all every Monday, but I just prefer not to.
Have the meetings or see Doug?
Kind of both, see Doug at those meetings. Up next is the town clerk on page 100.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
So there are some, obviously some changes here as well. Mostly if you look under the employee benefits, you got some changes based on wage changes. We do have a new deputy town clerk in place. So if you look back through the history there, you'll see that the budgeted amount for that position is less than it was for this year that's budgeted, because we had that change. And I'm sure once we get into the workshop, there's a difference of opinion between myself and the town clerk when it comes to that position's salary, and you can see that in the breakdown in the two different columns. And we certainly can get into that when we get into the workshops and the discussion around that. Down under purchased and contractual services, there's a $500 increase in election costs. And this is all budgeted based on the presidential election that's coming up, when we know we're gonna have more costs associated with that. And that also falls in under the rent of equipment, that's the election machines. So the clerk had asked that we rent another machine, so we have 3 machines to count the ballots instead of 2 when it comes to the presidential election. I think that makes sense, so that we don't have long lines and people waiting and being frustrated to cast their ballots. Also related to the elections, under capital items, furniture and fixtures, line 7335, you'll see $1,800 in there. So the clerk plans on going away from the voting booths that we have now, that are single voting booths that have the curtain to them to a newer, it's really a quad voting booth that will stand in the room, and they'll have 4 stations around it. They're all still separated, of course, so for privacy, but they're a little bit, they sit in the middle of the floor instead of up against the wall. We can get, they're $900 a piece, basically, for each set of 4. They're much, much easier. I've had experience with these in another community where we changed over from the old style booths to the new ones. They are much faster to install, to put up and bring down. They're easier to store, they're much more lightweight, and you can basically get more voting booths in the room with these than you can with the old style single booths that line the walls.
What's our gain? The number of people who could be in there at one time?
The number of people that can be in there at one time, plus again, the staff time to put these up
What
and
is
tear
the-
them down.
What is the gain? What's the number gain?
I don't, off the top of my head, so we're budgeting for 2, so that gives us 8 voting stations, if you will, because there's 4 in each station. And so how many booths do we have, Linda, currently up now?
We currently have 15, but by state law, we have to have 1 booth for every 200 residents we have. So we have 15 now, so we will need 4 quads, which would be 16.
How
So the
many of
space-
those are
the space-
handicap accessible? What about handicap accessible?
They have handicapped accessible as
So
well.
the space you have available with your current setup, are you going to have enough of the new booths to be able to put in place versus the current system?
The plan would be in year 2, so this will be the first year we'll buy 2, the second year we'll buy 2 more.
Correct.
And then we'll be,
But there's only so much space. When you go in, you register, you have your other people that are set up in their little, so are you going to be able to make enough room to
We're
have
not-
these?
We're not going to have the old booths, they're going to go away.
I understand that.
yes,
That's what I'm
so
saying.
there will be plenty of, there'll actually be more space, we'll gain space
Right.
Okay.
by
So
having the,
petitioners will be able to be inside instead of outside, so like in November, when we have to have them outside or on a rainy day, we'll be able to have them inside, which is more efficient.
Yep.
and
yes, by
friendlier.
putting these 4 freestanding booths, we do gain space.
But we're only buying 2 right now.
Yes, the
And-
plan was to buy 2 now, and then we'll buy 2 in the next
So
budget year.
initially, you have to still use the old ones until you
Right.
have the sufficient
It's
4, right?
Right, it's
Right.
just basically to get people used to something new. And I have contacted the company, and they will let us use those 2 in the June election. And then if it's approved in the budget, then we would just keep them thereon.
Yeah, and I've noticed in other communities that I've managed, it's a good thing to try them out first, if you will, because it is a change. And people are used to voting in those old booths for decades, so, my experience is that the majority of people like them. There's debate about, when I first did this in another community, or my clerk had asked to do it in another community, they don't have, as they come, they don't have a curtain behind them, because again, it's kind of awkward with a four station, if you will. They're all facing each other in, but they have the dividers, so you can't see. But then people felt uncomfortable that they didn't have anything behind them that's covering what they're doing. In reality, your body is covering your workspace, if you will. But we did add curtains, and we discussed that a little bit, and felt that we'll try this, see what the feedback is, and then go from there. So there might be, if people feel like they need to have the curtains, then we can always add those on later,
Bring an umbrella.
and just have it over your back.
Is this one of the boots make my butt look big?
Under revenues, you'll see an increase in agent fees, basically about $4,500 in projected revenue. And that's because the state actually did change their archaic law that allowed us to increase our agent fees on motor vehicle registrations. And so the board approved that change, I want to say back in the beginning of November. So that allows us to get some more revenue, which is a good thing. And under town clerk fees, again, these are based on what we're actually looking at. And I'm sure the whole discussion will be, on revenue, will be around excise tax, as it is in every community that I work in. And so I've budgeted a small increase of 15,000 from 860 to the 875 for excise tax. One of the reasons that I'm generally conservative when it comes to excise tax anyway, just because you never know if it's going to continue. The other aspect here, a little bit different in this community than others that I've managed, but we have some fleets that are registered by companies. And my concern is that if one of those companies was to decide to move or went out of business or something along those lines, we could easily, I looked at one, and the clerk and I looked at one, and we could easily lose $30,000 in excise tax in 1 year if that company decided that they wanted to move somewhere else, or they went out of business. So it's good to be, especially in this community, a little bit conservative, I think, when it comes to excise tax.
I miss Ken's breakdown of, and predictions on the excise tax, huh? Do you remember how he would, and he was always very bullish with respect to them.
I'm sure. And we do have all the charts that we'll bring to the workshops too, with that shows the excise tax breakdown. And of course, the select board sees those on a monthly basis with the clerk's report as well, the clerk's monthly report, so. I didn't really go over any of the others. There are small increases here or there in the budget, but I didn't really touch base on those. But I certainly, if you have questions, I'll answer those as well.
How are we trending this year, year-to-date, with, not with this number, but do you have more updated, do you know more updated numbers on excise tax? Are we gonna hit our
I can have
budget?
one for Wednesday.
Yeah,
I was
I
curious
didn't
if
look,
we had
to be honest with you, I didn't look at it today. I know it seems like the months, and I've seen this in other communities too. Some months you'll say, well, wow, that's up 17%, and then the next month it comes in and it's down 15%. Linda, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Page 106, right? We have
Yeah, you do have the breakdown in there through December.
I think we're a little bit ahead of the trend as far as the excise tax was until last month, when it was like $5,000 less than the time before, so, and now with the economy the way it is, people may think twice before purchasing a new vehicle, so
February look good?
I haven't had a chance to look at that yet. I've been too busy with elections.
Yeah, well, page 106 shows that it was down from 71,000 to 64,000, right, in January?
Right.
January.
But the prior months were, yeah, I had down that we were tracking, like 2 months, we were tracking 3 or 4 months we were higher, 1 month we were lower, and then this month we were lower, January.
If we use the last
So-
5 months of what last year was, we'd be around 903, added to the 520 we're at now with the 7-month mark.
Yeah. And again, if you think about, losing
Oh, yeah, no,
potential,
I'm-
yeah.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
And for the workshop, we obviously will have the up-to-date numbers. We'll have February in there.
Yes, we will.
Yep. Other questions around the town clerk's budget? Okay. The Opera House budget's on page 226. So before we get into looking at the numbers here, a couple of changes here and with this department since I've taken over as manager. The Opera House manager / rental agent used to report to the Public Works Director, so that is no longer the case. It didn't make sense for me to have the Opera House in the Public Works chain of command, if you will. So the Opera House manager now reports directly to me. And so I've been paying some attention to the Opera House, as well as working with Drew on some different things. One of the items that I've asked Drew to take on is to put together a marketing plan for the building. And so some of that's reflected in this budget, which we'll explain. We're also looking at the rental fees. They were adjusted this year, but we're still looking at those. We want to try to make sure that when somebody rents the building, that they pay for the costs associated with the building. And we make a little bit of revenue as well. So previously, there were some issues with janitorial time and the house manager time, the rental agent time, the security time, that type of thing. And in some instances, there really wasn't, the rentor wasn't paying enough to cover what our costs were. So we've adjusted those, and there'll be another adjustment next year when we look at the fees. So looking down through here, and some of these items are tied under personnel, for instance, are tied exactly to the revenues as well. So if you look at security officers, for instance, $3,500, then over on the revenue side, you're gonna see $3,500 for security officers. Again, with the intent that when we need security, it's because it's rented, the renters pay for that. Health insurance is down, and again, that's just like as in other departments, that's based on what the actual selection is there for health insurance. Under line 3620, equipment repair and maintenance, you see $2,000 in there instead of $400 in the current year. And that basically was put in at my request. We need to get some new chairs for the days for those board and committee members that are here. If you've had the chance to sit in those chairs for longer than about an hour, you'll notice why.
We are,
And these ones are exactly the same.
yeah.
So I thought we'd take a step there. And they also, as these ones don't, they don't raise or lower. So, you know, some people, there's obviously a difference in heights of some people on the various boards that sit here.
I sit on a boat float a lot of times.
So it
So
would
I
be
can
good
see over the table.
to get those replaced. And I'm not looking for obviously expensive chairs. I mean, we're replacing 7 chairs for not a lot of money. And they'll last for years. Under the next line, the 3805 advertising/marketing/booking. So this, if you look, is budgeted at $500 for the current year. Drew had put in for $10,000 request, and I put that at $7,500. So the goal here is that in order for us to make money with this facility, I think we have to spend a little bit of money. So we're looking at different tacks. Number one being the marketing plan, advertising in some of the wedding magazines, bridal magazines, that type of thing. But also booking some acts that will come in, some performers that will come in, where then we can charge revenue, we can get revenue from the ticket sales to help offset those costs. So if you look in the ticket sales line on the revenue, you see an offsetting amount of $7,500. And this, we know what the expenses could be. The revenue, we're hoping that it's more than the $7,500, but that's the thought, is that if we can maybe, book a band, for instance, and have them come in on a Friday night or a Saturday night, and the town is providing that booking, and then we get the revenue and we pay the band X amount of dollars for their appearance, if you will. So we're trying to think outside the box a little bit more on that. We had one experiment, if you will, where we had a Thursday night band that we kind of sponsored that band, and we split the ticket revenue as a way to entice them to play and see how that would work. Well, we ended up, there was about 100 people, I think, that came that night on a Thursday night in February. So that's pretty good, I thought. So if we can get into either some sort of a rotation when the building isn't being utilized, especially in the winter months, more so than it is in the summer months when it's being rented, I think we can hopefully get more income from the building. And I think that hopefully the revenue line will increase in years to come, and that will adjust under the marketing side of it.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea too, and that's what Camden does, right? They sponsor their own events and.
Yeah. yeah. And Drew's been in touch with, obviously with Camden and
Yeah.
with Booth Bay, the Booth Bay Opera House as well. Very similar type of operations when it comes to that, so. Under,
Sorry, Drew, you were gonna say?
So I think
Yeah.
Camden only does about maybe 10% of their revenues come from their self-promoted, programming.
Yeah,
I mean, well, that's not necessarily every year, that's maybe last year, but, I'd like to see us, in time, bring in more revenue than 10%, but it would be a great place to start. I'm not even sure we can get to that the first year, but might
Well-
take some time.
and I think it's, I think with some guidance and leadership, I really think we can do that. I mean, it's something that I've tried to tackle. The Opera House is one area where I've kind of identified as an area that needed some more guidance and leadership, and I think Drew can certainly, is stepping up, with some help, especially considering he's part-time.
Right.
So, I think it's an incredible asset. We obviously have a unique setup in the auditorium where we don't have fixed seating on the main floor, so that we can host different events. When you think about the Cameron Opera House, they've got fixed seating everywhere, so they're hampered, limited what they can do. They certainly do a great job with the performers they bring in, but we have that extra flexibility to be able to have bands and dancing and the like. So we haven't really spent a lot of time looking at our plans yet, so it's one of the things that's gonna grow over the next several months. But I think that you'll see some improvements there for next year, hopefully. Under supplies, under audio, video equipment supplies, line 5316, see an increase from 500 to 2250. And this is basically so that we can broadcast these meetings on the cable channel as well as the live stream, because obviously not everybody has internet capability and the like, and there are people that want to watch it on the cable channel. So I'd asked Jeff Parker what we needed to budget for in order to do that, and that's what this number reflects.
and we've got a number of residents who have requested that, and I had passed that on previously to Rick, and you and I have had some conversations about it, so I'm really
Yep.
glad to see us go that direction.
And I'd seen some of those notes when I took over as well. Under the capital side, you'll notice building improvements, the first line. The department had requested $100,000. I reduced it down to $41,000, and as I said in my overview the first night, this is for the air conditioning, the main air conditioning unit for the auditorium. Originally, the quote before I came on board was $120,000. We got an updated quote, and the ductwork doesn't need to be replaced, it needs to be cleaned. So that's why it's such a much smaller number, 41,000. And so obviously there's an offsetting revenue, use of Opera House Building Reserve on the next page of the 41,000, so it's offsetting. So we're gonna use that reserve to be able to do that. Under the line 7304, audio, video, lighting equipment, so you'll see the request of $103,000. And I cut it down to zero. I will say that we need to put $3,000 in that line. We do need to put $3,000, just to continue or finish up the work that Jeff has been doing to upgrade the equipment down here. So the
3,000?
3,000, yeah. The 100,000 plus the 3 that was requested. So the $100,000 essentially is the auditorium. So there's a great deal of work that needs to be done up in the auditorium to upgrade the lighting, the audio equipment, and all of that. I'm not prepared to build that into the budget at this point because I want to work with Drew to really ferret that out. What is it that we need to do? Can we do it in stages? You know, can the wiring handle what it is that needs to be done? And I think the answer to that is yes, but I think we need to have a plan put together first, so we can really see what it is that we need, and if we can do it in stages, that would be the goal. So you might see some of that next year when we're budgeting, that, you know, the first step is A, the next step is B, and on we go. But that also will lead to, I think, better use of the building as well, if we have updated lighting, and also just maintenance of it. What he has to do now is a little difficult. when it comes to just general maintenance on the lights that exist.
Right.
Little MacGyver action.
Yeah, definitely. Climbing around 25 feet in the air.
During last year's discussion, are you finished?
Yeah, well, we can ask questions, yeah.
Well, it's not really a question, it's just
Or
a
statement.
statement. And I remember last year during the budget season, we talked about the Opera House Committee. And there was a pretty strong feeling among the select board that hoped that the Opera House Committee would sort of step forward and begin to look at setting up an endowment, working for some independent fundraising that could be used to defray some of these costs. Now, I don't think anything was done, but again, I would hope again this year that the people that use this Opera House a fair amount, I think there would be people that would be willing to, make some donations to help defray some of these fairly high capital costs, and hope
Yeah.
we'll explore it.
I've inserted myself into the Opera House Committee as well, not as an
Okay.
official member, but I'm attending those meetings
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
And I've expressed those
Thoughts.
concerns and those
Okay,
thoughts.
good.
And
Thank you.
I want them to be involved in, the marketing plan, the bigger picture items.
Yeah, thinking
Planning for the
ahead.
thinking ahead. And so I think they're starting to think that way now. We're beginning to see where I'm going. And they're very supportive of not looking at necessarily the operations, but looking at the big picture.
Good, thank you.
So hopefully there'll be a change there.
That, one of the things that I asked Bill one day, standing in the doorway signing the warrants, was the elevator.
Yep.
And I said, well, where do we have an elevator? And it's the stair lift. So I think you can reduce that if you look, because I checked with Megan, I went back to look at the warrant that I had signed the week before. And there are three components. One is the inspection to make sure it'll lift a certain amount of weight. And the other ones is 2 state inspections that have to happen to it.
Right.
So the inspection that certifies the weight is done only every 5 years, which is $500 and some odd dollars. So I think that $1,480, it's small change, but I think it could be less. Not counting your 2 state inspections, I think we're around 580 combined. And then the other one was the bigger number.
Yep.
But
Camden Conference use this building this year? Did they do
They
that?
didn't this year, no.
Only for the Tom and Mac show,
So
which may have even been done
was
at
a
the library.
library event,
But,
technically.
Upstairs one show.
Is there an opportunity to get them to use the building for, the concern I heard was the comfort of the seats, I guess, from one of the board members, but, I mean, is there?
They have used it in the past.
Yeah, unlike SIF, which has many different venues, Camden Conference is very, everybody is in one place. Now, what we could do is put a lure on the fishing line and see whether they wanted, they are doing significant work in live streaming it on, simultaneously, and that may be, we're all set up for it, but I can certainly put you in touch with them.
Well, I thought there were other venues that there are no live speakers, that they're, like, I thought Rockland.
Yeah, that's what I mean, we could be
Hanover.
one of those.
That would be like one step, and then the next might be, right, is maybe part of the program.
Yeah, honestly, I don't see that happening, but I see it, from everybody's point of view, we should be a satellite place for it to be beamed to, live stream to while it's happening.
Right.
And did you say we were in the past one time, or we weren't?
No, we haven't ever been on the live stream,
Okay.
thing for them. They go Hutchinson Center, they go Strand, they go Portland,
Hanover,
Andover, New Hampshire.
yeah, this year.
Okay, yeah, I know that they're expanding that out, so.
And do you think that, like, did this meet your or do you think it can kind of be one of those things that breaks even, gets an endowment someday, and?
I'd love to see it get an endowment first and foremost, and I think that's important. I think that the Opera House Committee could definitely, begin fundraising efforts and the like, but I think we have to have that plan in place first, so that we know what it is that what our plan is for the future, so that then we have a goal in mind. Again, it's a little bit different here versus the harbor, because we do have not that the harbor's not a valuable asset, but we have a rentable building. And there's a lot of activity in this area, as you know, like the SIF and others. So I think that getting closer to it, I think, is possible. And again, it depends on the fundraising effort, you know, what that looks like, and the marketing plan too, you know, how that comes out and how successful it is or not.
Question for Jeff and Andrew. Last year, we were talking about the need to have to move equipment upstairs and downstairs. Are we still in, did we resolve that, or are we still having to do that?
We resolved that. There's,
Okay.
there's infrastructure where cameras come down, so for the town meeting, there'll be an operator down here, there'll be somebody doing the audio board, so it has to be for the house anyway, and all we'll move is the cameras.
We did that actually for the town hall. First time we utilized that was our last.
So what we're doing is moving cameras,
Correct.
and, okay,
So we're saving a lot of time,
I'm good.
yeah. And using that as a model, there's the outside chance if there's a desire to utilize some of the equipment here to be over at the Richardson Room, if there was an opportunity to want to live stream out of there.
Quick question, looking again at revenue line 1052. So we're spending another $7,500 on marketing, and our anticipated rental is down a couple $1,000, although the year before we only had 14,000. So
We're actually budgeting the same amount as the current year for rentals, but the rentals have been off in the current year, so I'm hoping that we can get back up to the
Okay.
19,000.
All right.
I had the same question, and I noticed that the ticket sales are up $7,500, so if we
Right.
imagine advertising and breaking even the first year as we try this,
Yeah,
it seems.
and I'm optimistic that we can hopefully do better than break even when it comes to that. That would be the goal anyway, but I do want to be a little bit conservative there too, because it's new ground that we're gonna approach here.
It's driven by number of events.
Right. Yep. Other questions? Okay. Next up is two things we have no control over, counties and schools. 249 is the county tax. Actually, 250 is the detail. So if you notice here, it is decreased, the county assessment, and the overall amount that goes to the county has decreased, even though the dispatch fees are up, but the county tax is down. And that's basically because the state valuations have finally caught up. So when it decreased here, and I said this in my overview too, so when our valuation decreased that significant amount a few years back, now it's finally caught up with the state valuation, so that's why the county tax has decreased, which is definitely a good thing. And the schools, they're on page 261. These are just complete, shot in the dark, throw it out there, hope and pray that it's less. We don't have any numbers yet from the schools, so I would anticipate that the increase will be less than what we built in there. I'm hoping, but I figured we'd throw a big number in there just to scare everybody. I'm hoping they're not using that as a goal too, so if they see that. So if they're listening, please don't use that as a goal.
In the past, Mary Libby came in and did a presentation to us, and so I would assume that she would probably be doing that again.
We're hoping, I know they've gone through a number of different business managers.
And I think shortly Bill, Carrie, and I are gonna try to meet with Maria and the new business manager, so.
Yeah, we've sent the invitation out to meet with her and the business manager, so we're waiting. Insurance is on page, what is it, 131?
132.
Actually, 132 is the detail. It's always good when I can tell you that the expenses for insurance are down 8%.
Yep.
Couple of areas that I'll point out, or really one area that I'll point out, is the public officials liability. This is where I get to toot my horn and toot the finance director's horn a little bit. I'm a certified manager through the Maine Town City County Management Association, and as such, the town gets a discount of about 3% from the public officials liability insurance. Megan just recently received her certification as a certified municipal treasurer through the Maine Treasurers and Tax Collectors Association. I think I've got the name of that one right. And so we also receive a discount from our public officials liability for that. The other decreases are basically from our insurance carrier based on what we have. So you see the vehicle insurance has decreased, property and casualty has decreased as well. And a lot of it's based on loss history, obviously, when it comes to insurance. Down under revenues, the first line, 0502, the MMA insurance dividend. So the town has been receiving this. It is all over the place depending on how well the insurance risk pool does for MMA. But we figured that we should budget it as we've been receiving that over the past several years. So we did budget a little bit conservatively based on what the risk pool is going to do. So you'll see that amount in there of $3,000 budgeted. Questions?
Didn't we talk one time about taking some of the monies returned and utilizing it towards training?
Yes.
Because, is that reflected in here somewhere? Maybe I've missed it, or?
The board had decided to establish the employee safety reserve with one of the premiums that comes back, and so we've done that.
Okay.
Yep, and that'll be done on an ongoing basis, so. That's why we've reduced, I think in the town manager's budget,
All right.
we reduced the expenses a little bit for safety, so. Next up is debt service on page 241, 242. There are two major differences here, and we talked about these in my overview too. The library bond payment for principal, that'll be the first payment, so that's adds $75,000 to debt service. And then under line 6210, interest on band, so that's the bond anticipation note interest for the infrastructure bond. So we pay interest obviously on the ban as we draw down and use that over the next 2 years really. Then we'll pay interest on the ban.
I'm sorry, Bill, the infrastructure bond is 6205 or?
The interest on the ban, 6210. So there's an infrastructure bond before from 2016.
Right. That's the old one.
That's the old one. And then the interest on the ban is the bond anticipation note. So you don't see the new infrastructure bond isn't in there yet because we haven't borrowed that yet. But we'll be borrowing in anticipation of that bond so that we don't pay a huge amount of interest in this first year.
That's in 6205?
That's line 6210.
Okay, so that's,
So we budgeted $20,000 for that.
you're accruing interest,
When
in
we-
essence,
Yes.
in
when we-
anticipation of
Of issuing the
bond
bond.
payment.
There's a couple of different ways you can do that. We could have borrowed the bond all at once,
Right.
acquired the bond, and then pay a larger amount of interest because we borrowed the full amount. Or we can borrow in anticipation of that bond, and then only pay interest on the amounts that we use as we go along and pay for the project.
Good.
So that's the cheaper way to do that. Other questions on debt service anywhere?
So it used to be that the school was very helpful in terms of being flexible with our payments to them during high times when a lot of money was going out. Are they still able to give us that flexibility with the new?
For the most part, they've had a lot of changeover in staff. But we're making it work.
It's not a ringing endorsement, is it, Jeff?
No, but it allows us to resist painting with a villainous brush, so.
Right, right.
Will we have any idea what our payment to Camden will be with the wastewater improvements they're doing?
Not
Or is
yet.
that coming up in the,
That's coming up in the wastewater budget, but we don't have that number nailed down yet.
there's no, not even a plug-in guesstimate, or,
We're working on it.
I mean, 'cause that's, yeah.
Yep.
Bill, I'm just curious, or Megan.
Yeah.
Our long-term debt for a town of our size, where do we sort of fall amongst our peers?
Are you looking at just the municipal debt versus county and school thrown in there too?
Municipal.
Yeah. My general thought there is that we're very good actually with our long-term debt. I mean, I know we've got the infrastructure bond out there, and obviously we have the library bond that we're just starting to pay back, but in my experience, we're very healthy when it comes to what our debt is. Not that I'm not one that likes to borrow for stuff. I'd much rather save for it, but there are instances where you can't, you need to borrow. For instance, for the library, for the new West Rockport Fire Station, when we get to that point, you know, those are big infrastructure projects that we have to take care of, and it makes sense to, in my opinion, for the taxpayers that are utilizing those services to be paying for them as they're using them, instead of saving the money up, and then they don't have the benefit of those, and then doing it later on. Very much with the infrastructure, I mean, obviously, that's a catch-up bond, but that also benefits the people that are using the roads, for instance. They're using it now, and they're paying for it now, instead of saving the money and not getting the benefit of the repairs later on. So that's my general philosophy. But overall, yeah, I mean, we're so far below what our debt limit is, which I never would want to be anywhere close to, but we're so far below that, you know, it's not even a blip really when it comes to it.
If you look at page 241, I have it broken out as to what our allowed municipal debt is and what percentage of that allowable debt we're currently at. So we're currently only utilizing 8.07% of our allowable municipal debt, 0.64% of our allowable wastewater debt, and the school's at 18.9% of their allowable debt.
Any other questions about the debt service? So then under special assessments, which is the last department, if you will, that's on page 264 is the detail. And I will say that there are a lot of things that you'll probably see next year that will be in different places than you see them this year. This is probably one of those items that I would put in a different spot, under a different department, but the tax billing is under the same category, under this category here is an expenditure. And then down under the revenues, some good news, if you look under state revenue sharing, line 0056, slated to increase, and this is the second year of the biennial state budget where they increase the percentages. We're still not back to where we're supposed to be, which is 5% of sales tax and income tax is supposed to be shared through the convoluted formula of revenue sharing. This will get us up to, I believe, 3.75%.
Something like that.
So last year it went from 2% to 3%. This year it's going from 3 to 3.75%. And that number is, it's an estimate anyway, because it's based on the revenue forecast projections for revenue. So all we can do is plug in the best guesstimate that we have. When we do the tax commitment, then we'll have a much better estimate when we actually do the tax commitment. Because the state treasurer's office releases those numbers middle of March, I think, if I remember correctly. And well, that's when they're supposed to. Doesn't mean that they always do. Sometimes they're very late. But that is a positive sign. And with my work on the MMA's Legislative Policy Committee, this has been for 12 years, well, I won't say for 12. Once they started cutting revenue sharing and really looking at as a balancing the state's budget by taking the money from municipalities, we've been continuously fighting to get that back. It's a little different under the previous administration. We were more in a protect what we have mode, and now we're actually making some gains when it comes to this. So hopefully, the next legislative session, our goal will be to get that back up to 5%, which would be helpful for all the municipalities, so. Questions here at all?
Why no revenue in the first 2 months?
You can't count for them in your budget because they're an offset when you do your tax commitment.
And that's why you'll see the actuals. We know what they are once we're doing the tax commitment, but we won't know them now currently. So I've seen some communities that have had newer managers make mistakes when it comes to that, and they'll count the revenue twice. So they'll count, say homestead exemption reimbursement as a revenue here, and then when they're doing the tax rate calculation form, they'll count it in there as well, which is, there is a spot for it. And so then, when they look at their numbers later on, they double counted revenue, which is never a good thing, of course. But I've seen it happen in a number of communities. And again, I haven't budgeted any use of undesignated fund balance. So keep that in mind when we're looking at the total budget and in those discussions in the workshop. Again, I think it's important that we increase that amount in the undesignated fund balance so that we don't have any cash flow issues at all, and so that we are healthier. Other questions? Okay. So just as a reminder to look at your schedules coming up, I know we have, this week, we have Select Board Workshop on Wednesday. Consensus votes are currently scheduled for Thursday. There's been a little bit of discussion as to whether or not they may take place on Wednesday after the workshop, depending on what the discussions are and where we go from there.
Yeah, see, Jeff is not gonna be here Thursday, is that right? But the rest of the board will be here Thursday. And Denise, of course,
She'll be back.
she'll be back by then.
Yeah, she's supposed to be back tomorrow, I believe.
Tomorrow.
And then the Budget Committee meets next week.
So I think the plan is if we can do our consensus votes, that we would try to do them on Wednesday, and the notice will allow us to do that, and if we can't, we do Thursday.
Yep.
So I think that's pretty much what we've said.
Bill, I think, and Megan, certainly, I think that this first pass was very calm and dispassionate, and I appreciate that. Seemed to go very well. I think we have good handling on things. Maybe people are just exhausted, I don't know, but this went very nicely so far.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I would too.
Well, again, when it comes to budgeting, as far as I'm concerned, I'll be better, even more prepared next year, because I'll have a full year under my belt. But I firmly believe that it's not about emotions when you're looking at the budget. It's about facts and figures and keeping in mind what taxpayers can afford, but also what we need to provide those services to the residents that they've come to expect and want. At the same time, planning for the future as well. So I look forward to when my philosophy, you can actually start seeing it work. I hate to say, but in my previous position, when I first started there, they borrowed for everything. So, if it was a $50,000 truck, they borrowed for it. And I was slowly getting them off, weaning them off the borrowing by building reserve accounts and the like. And now my successor there is starting to see that actually take place, where they're have reserve accounts so that when they have to replace a piece of equipment, they have the money for it. instead of borrowing for it. It took me 8 years to do that. We're in a much better state here because of the reserve accounts that are already there, so it's just a matter of really tweaking them and doing a real good look at them moving forward and making sure that we have the money there. Because I don't like surprises during the budget year. There are always bound to be some, but if we can plan, it makes it much, much better for the taxpayers. And if we can try to keep the tax rate as level as we can, or at least very small increases, keeping in mind, of course, the school budget we have no control over, but if we can protect ourselves, then that's better for us. So, but I appreciate everybody's questions and comments. Part of it's a learning experience for me too, so, new town, new budget committee members. So I appreciate it and look forward to the discussions too.
Okay, thanks. Well, if that's all, then we'll see you Wednesday at 5:30.
Yep.